So next up, we've got Roger Hooke. Roger's going to, I think, take us a level or two higher and kind of help us understand the historically and throughout time the increasing geologic agency of humans. So we're going from seeing some very specific examples of the work and the things that folks are doing and why we need to do it in this area. Now Roger's going to put that into context for us. So
thank you. May I get mine? You want to get mine? Oh, it's up. Yeah, sorry about that.
thanks very much.
Well, thanks. Well, let's go back a little further away. Thanks for inviting me to come today, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more than I have in the last 20 minutes, because I come from this from a very different perspective. So I appreciate Brett's invitation and the organization, the organizers' efforts to put this together. I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about my work on the subject of humans as geomorphic agents. Geomorphology, of course, is a study of the landforms. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the way in which dredging disrupts the natural tendency toward a balance between input and output of sediment landscape. And we've already heard a certain amount about that in the first two talks. Back in January of 1992, I read an article in the New York Times on the number of housing starts in the past year. And that sort of piqued my interest, and I started to pull out an envelope and turned it over to the back and began scratching a little bit. And after a while, I decided that house building probably involves something like movement of 8 gigatons of soil, earth per year in the United States. Now, 8 gigatons, that's 8 billion, well, 8.8. Gigaton is 1 billion tons. So that's a little bit more than Lisa was talking about earlier. And then the question was, well, what other activities do humans engage in that involve moving earth? And the two that I looked into were road building and mining. And again, scratching around on the back of an envelope and going to the library to pull out a few numbers, like the length of roads in the U.S. and the productivity of mines, including gravel and quarrying. I came out with these numbers, a total of about 7.6 gigatons. And in the U.S., we consume about 22% of the world's energy. Using this as a scaling factor, the total earth moved by humans worldwide may approach something like 35 gigatons per year. Now, that's probably a minimum estimate, because it does not include things like building levees, building dams, excavations for commercial buildings, or, in fact, dredging. Well, to compare that with more traditional geomorphic agents, I began looking at how much sediment is moved by rivers and glaciers and other geomorphic processes. Rivers come closest to matching us and may exceed us depending on how you calculate things. Rivers deliver about 15 to 20 gigatons per year of sediment to the oceans. They deliver about 4 gigatons to interior basins. In the absence of human disturbance, The delivery of sediment to the oceans would probably be more like 14 gigatons. So humans are having a major impact on that source of sediment. Meandering, just the shifting of river bends back and forth, erosion on the outside of a bend, deposition on the inside of a bend, moves about 39-40 gigatons per year. These other figures are all much smaller and don't in any way compare. So on that basis, I argue that humans have become arguably the premier geomorphic agent on Earth today. Well, this paper excited quite a bit of interest, so I began to think of ways in which I could continue that pipeline of work. And one possibility was looking at the amount of sediment that was moved, or earth that was moved by humans in the past. If, for example, you know the volume of the pyramid of Cheops, you know roughly the population in the area in which the pyramid was built, and you know the length of time that it took to build it, you can get an estimate of the earth move per capita. And then looking at that over time, you see there's a sort of a steady increase. And then there's this dramatic increase here, beginning at about the time of the Industrial Revolution, when we began particularly things like mining coal, and greatly accelerated at the time of the introduction of the internal combustion engine. And now we have excavators with buckets that can hold 15 cubic meters, and dump trucks with capacities of 70 cubic meters. So these are really large vehicles that accelerate our earth-moving endeavors. Gotta figure out which button to push here. Most recently, I've been looking at along with a couple of Spanish colleagues, I've been looking at the land use as of 2007, and particularly the land that has been in some way altered by human activity, so that it's not the same landscape as it was before. Cropland erodes at about 15 tons per hectare per year as a result of clearing the vegetation and plowing and so forth. So that land is being modified at a rate that is higher than it would have been before it was turned into cropland. Pasture the same way, 5 tons per hectare per year. That sediment is washed downstream. A lot of it is deposited in floodplains and on colluvium on slopes. And so we try to make an estimate of that area. Logging, planted forests disturb the soil, increase erosion. Urban expansion, just the area covered by urban areas, and that area is expanding at a rate of about 15,000 square kilometers per year, and expected to continue expanding at that rate for the next couple of decades. And most of that expansion goes into areas of prime farmland, which raises some questions about our ability to feed a whole lot more people in the future. Rural housing results in modification of the landscape, and highways, reservoirs, railroads, mines. So arguably, humans are affecting about slightly over 50% of the land area, ice-free land area of the Earth. Now, just briefly, how does the natural system adjust itself? Well, an example from some work I did a long time ago, a river has a point bar, as I suspect most of you know, deep on the outside of the bend. And why is the point bar there? Well, it turns out that the sediment is transported along what I call the down valley bank, down valley in that direction. It's transported along the down valley bank, shifts across the channel in the bend, and is transported along the down valley bank here. Now, to accomplish that, the shear stress in the bottom of the river needs to adjust to be able to transport that sediment. And it does so by depositing sediment, which might be counterintuitive, but sediment is deposited simply because the shear stress can't move it. That deposition results in a convergence of the flow. The flow gets shallower as it goes along here, and that actually increases the shear stress. So the system adjusts itself into this equilibrium topography. Now, if you try to dredge a channel across that point bar, which you might do in the Mississippi, where dredging a channel across a point bar like that could save you 5 to 7 river miles of travel. The river's just going to try to fill it in again. And depending on the sediment load of the river, it will fill in faster or slower, months, a year or two. Same thing with dredging harbors. And as you've just heard from Andrew, the same thing, and Lisa, the same thing occurs when you try to dredge a harbor, like New York. It begins to fill in again. And so we're operating against natural tendencies. And one thing to be concerned about in designing for the dredge projects is how long will the project last, and is there a way in which we can do it so that we're not, we can work with the natural system rather than just trying to oppose it. Can we dredge in an area where the sediment flux is low so it won't fill in as rapidly as it would if we dredge in a place where the sediment flux is high? So that's what I had to contribute. Thank you.